Izzy, can you hear us?
I think it's frozen for her. That's
I
okay.
really do. I can just go ahead and start with the bios then if we want to wait for her, or if you want to do, if you know what she was supposed to say.
Yeah, no, I got it. Hi, everyone. My name is Kendra Claypool. I am the temporary assistant director for the Women's Center and Pride Center in the Office for Inclusive Excellence. I want to thank everyone for joining us on the Intersectionality Rock Talk. Tonight, we have 3 panelists joining us, and Alex is going to be introducing those here in a moment. These panelists were given the opportunity to answer the following question of how do your perceptions and how you are perceived in the world conflict based on your identities? Each panelist will be given about 10 to 12 minutes expanding their thoughts pertaining to this question. And to keep this time efficient, we ask that if you have questions, please save them for the end. We'll have an open Q&A, and absolutely utilize the chat if you have questions. We'll get to those at the end. If you don't want to forget them, please put them in there. And I'll pass it over to Alex.
All right, so first, I hope I'm saying this correctly. I have Representative Emily Kinkead. Is that how you say that?
Kinkead.
Kinkead, I apologize. I even had that in my notes. Anyway, she serves as a state representative for Pennsylvania in the 20th Legislative District, which includes parts of Pittsburgh and Ross Township, as well as the borough of Avalon, Bellevue, and Westview. She was first elected in 2020 and currently serves on the House Appropriations, Agriculture, Human Services, and Judiciary Committees. Before entering law school, Emily worked a variety of organizations in Washington, D.C., working on policy related to disability rights, good government reform, and medical research investment through the National Institutes of Health. Emily graduated from Pitt Law in 2016 and served as a judicial law clerk to the Honorable Judge Michael Rojakic of the Commonwealth Court before entering private practice. Prior to her election, she worked as an associate for the Grail Law Firm, and since 2017, she has been actively involved in the Allegheny County Bar Association Women in the Law Division's Committee for Advancing Professionalism that works to address issues of bias in the legal profession. All right. So next we have Dr. Lisa Abel-Palmieri. Did I say that correctly? Okay, great. So she is the president and CEO of Boys and Girls Club of Western PA, an organization with 12 clubhouses and partners with over 20 school districts. She brings over 20 years of experience to the role. She is passionate about shaping the future of learning by designing equitable experiences that engage the heart, mind, and innate skills in youth. Prior to BGCWPA, she was an executive director and chief learning officer at Nazareth Prep, a progressive independent school affiliated with Historic Human Services Agency, Holy Family Institute that focuses on bridging education to employment skill gaps in the region for students who've traditionally been untapped. Lisa has been a classroom teacher, after-school program director, STEAM coordinator, director of technology, CLO, and has held positions in industry and workforce development, training, and marketing a decade before entering education in nonprofit spaces. Most importantly, she's a champion for youth and enjoys long-standing relationships with her past students who are now adults. She received a Bachelor of Arts in Public Relations and Design from Deuce County University, as well as a Master of Arts in Integrated Marketing and Master of Science and Technology. A Doctorate of Philosophy was earned at Robert Morris University in Instructional Management and Leadership. She holds a business certificate from Deuce County University's Palumbo School of Business. Lisa was awarded Nonprofit CLO of the Year by the Pittsburgh Technology Council in 2013. She was honored to join the Deeper Learning Equity Fellows in 2016. She's named an ASCD Emerging Leader, Robert F. Kennedy Urban Education Leader of the Year finalist, Who's Next in Education 40 Under 40 by Pittsburgh Magazine, Women of Achievement, and Pittsburgh Business Times Women of Influence. A co-lead with the Remake Learning and A+ School, Lisa believes partnerships and culturally relevant experiences launch innovative ideas and programs. She's on numerous advisory committees in the region and is the Senior Vice President of Growth for the Boy Scouts of America, Laurel Highlands Council, President of the PHCSEE Foundation, Advisory Board for Rosedale Technical College, on the Queen's Gambit Chess Institute Board, and on Boys and Girls Clubs of America Workforce Development Advisory Committee. She is married to Clayton, and they have a son, Anthony, who's in 4th grade. They enjoy building, crafting together, and attending Cub Scouts. She comes from a large Italian family with humble beginnings in Pittsburgh steel mills after immigrating from the rolling hills in Abruzzo, Italy. Next, we have Riah Eisner. Did I say that right, Riah? Great, I practiced that. So I'm gonna say it right. Anyway, she's a first-year student at SRU and a double major in political science and psychology. She's on the pre-law track and has a unique perspective in regards to education, as she had attended both PWIs and predominantly BIPOC schools. This experience has only added to how she has navigated going to Slippery Rock University. She's passionate about social issues and actively involves herself within the SRE community because of her lived experiences. And that's it for bios. Thank you guys for joining us. I really appreciate it. Okay, so let me get my timer out. So Representative Kinkead, did you want to go first?
Sure. Unfortunately, I have to jump off because I have a dinner that I have to run to.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Do you want me to start?
Yes, I'm going to start a timer for my own sake, but you can go whenever you're ready.
Sure. I don't know that I will need 10 to 15 minutes or 10 to 12 minutes, although I am a lawyer and a politician, so I will fill time. So I guess I'll give you just a little bit of a broader background than my bio. So I'm originally from Pittsburgh, and very much come from a background, a working class background. But sort of bridge the gap because my dad is kind of the epitome of the American dream, where he was the son of a single mom, and grew up very poor, and worked hard and took advantage of opportunities, and was actually able to go to medical school. And so he is a doctor, and so I grew up for most of my life with my dad as a doctor. And so that really changed my outcomes in a lot of ways, and my ability to access opportunities, but also still keeps me grounded in the sense that, in a lot of ways it was, it was luck and it was opportunity. And it was also the fact that my dad is a white man, cis het white man in the world. And so he did not have the kinds of challenges that, a lot of people do. So, as I have, worked in the world, both as working on policy and then as an attorney, and now as a politician, as an elected official, I'm very aware of the fact that I'm a woman in a lot of these spaces, which is largely my only, diverse identity. I'm white, I'm cis, I'm het, so I'm not, I don't have a lot of the challenges that a lot of folks have had, and I grew up with a lot of privilege that even my dad didn't have when he was growing up. So I'm very aware of the privilege that I have, but I am also, abundantly aware of the perception that I have as a young woman in the profession that I'm in. The legal profession is incredibly difficult at times because it's very slow moving, and I've spent a lot of time working on the kind of bias that still pervades our justice system. We make a lot of decisions in the justice system based on perception, based on implicit biases, and some of them are good, some of them are bad. And so, I've been working a lot with the Women in the Law Division at the Allegheny County Bar Association to try and at least educate lawyers in my sphere about the bias that they experience. But it's still hard because there is a lot of perception of women, even as we have advanced in certain things. There's still a lot of perception of women as less competent, less capable, less well educated, less understanding of the nuances of things, and especially in the legal world where you want a zealous advocate for something, women are not perceived as sort of the sharks that men are. So a lot of times you'll see people prefer to hire a male attorney over a female attorney because they want somebody who's going to go and fight their case, and they don't necessarily believe that a woman can do that. And so and especially a young woman, there's a lot of times where I've walked into a room as an associate and I am representing a client. And I have to alert the men in the room that I am an attorney. I'm not a secretary. I'm not a paralegal. I am actually representing on equal footing with them, my client in that room. And that I want to ask questions, and I want to, have that opportunity. And then as an elected official, in a lot of ways, it's kind of the same experience. I don't know if you guys can see it. We got these member pins. And I have to wear these in places that are kind of like, it's weird to wear it. It's weird to wear a blazer to like maybe a walk for charity or something like that. But I do it because people don't recognize that I am an elected official. Like, I'll get invited to a thing and they're expecting someone who's older. They're expecting a man. They're not expecting that Representative Kinkead is a 34-year-old woman. And so they think I'm there, that I'm staff. They think that I'm, that I'm filling in. They're, I'm getting there ahead of time for the representative. And so, wearing my member pin kind of cuts through that experience of just like, no, I am actually the member. And I'm here to, to do the work. And, it's a perception that, again, similar to like being a lawyer, that I'm not as competent, I'm not as capable, I don't know as much as my older male peers. And that, that is something that, and again, like, I don't look like a traditional politician to, what people think, what a state representative looks like. Generally, a state representative is a man, and he's white, and he's older. And, I think perhaps the one thing that people expect of a state representative that I actually have is that I'm a lawyer. A lot of people expect state representatives to have some kind of a legal background. But it can be very frustrating because it requires more effort to be taken seriously at the same level. The other aspect is I'm a progressive woman, and so I'm liberal. I'm outspoken about that, and there is also there is a degree of sort of not taking that seriously. Also, that people who are more liberal, more progressive, are not actually serious. They don't have really serious ideas about how to make changes in the world and implement policy. And that, I'm coming into this and, I'm idealistic and I don't really understand how the world works. And so, I'll learn. And once I learn, then, I'll let go of these, ideas. And then it turns out that, hey, no, I actually have fully fleshed out policy ideas. I've worked in policy. I've worked on a lot of these issues before I ever was elected. And so I don't need to, have things explained to me. And men absolutely explain things to me. That's 100% a real thing. And what's most astounding to me about it is the fact that they explain things to me in a way that, I don't experience from women. I get a lot of men who are constituents who will just send me unsolicited advice about how to do my job through my social media channels. And they'll talk about how, like I introduced legislation a year ago, and it started to pick up some steam on in the press. And now I'm getting men explaining to me, the situation that ultimately prompted me to introduce this legislation. They're like, oh, thank you for introducing that legislation, but here's why this happens. And, I'd love to send you resources on it. And I'm like, I know why it happens. That's what prompted me to introduce the legislation. And it can absolutely be frustrating because, there are a lot of things that I combat as a professional woman that, I don't see my male colleagues combating. And, one of the other things that I combat as a young woman in elected office is because, we're all under a microscope, but I'm a young single woman. And so there are also rumors of, every time that I'm seen with a man in my professional life, that I'm clearly sleeping with them. And so, it's also combating that, like, I absolutely have the ability to have a professional relationship or even a friendly relationship. I can make friends with men in a professional capacity and not be sleeping with them. But it is, all of that is very real. And so, trying to kind of assert myself as a professional, as a young woman, as somebody who's well educated, and really combating the kind of implicit biases that people have when it comes to women in this profession, in the legal profession, in the political profession, it can be a lot. And I think you end up having to be on all the time. You have to be aware of the fact that people are watching you all the time. So it's like, you don't have the benefit of being able to go out to a bar and like get drunk because, people will see you, and that's, and you being sloppy drunk is much more detrimental as a woman than it is, because I've seen plenty of my male colleagues just be tanked at a bar. And it absolutely does not impact how they are perceived by our colleagues. But if I or any of my female colleagues were to get really drunk, it would be an entirely different story. So there's an aspect of just always having to be aware, no matter if you're off the clock or not, you're kind of always on as a woman in elected office. So I feel like I probably filibustered for a long enough amount of time, so I will turn it back to you guys. And I don't know if you're gonna do questions before I go, because I'm not sure if I'll be here once we get to the question and answer point.
First, I want to thank you. That was a really refreshing perspective. I mean, obviously, I'm sure a lot of people have experienced that as well, but not many people can say it was in that kind of setting. And I feel like that was a really interesting perspective. So thank you. And I wanted to open up for questions if anybody had any, because you're probably going to have to leave. So like, I'll probably give, let me see, maybe 5 to 6 minutes of questions, and then we can move on. If anybody had them, you can put it in the chat. I feel like we have a small enough group here that you can just yell it out if you want. But I had a question, but I'll let everybody else go first.
I'm not nearly as intimidating as I look.
I can go first while everyone's deciding. You mentioned that you had legislation that you introduced. Would you mind like saying what that was or what that's all about? I'm curious to know.
Sure. It's actually a bill on landslides, because my district is really impacted by landslides, and Allegheny County is really impacted by landslides. And so basically what this bill would do is, because there's actually no insurance available that would cover the cost of landslide damage on property. Your homeowner's insurance won't cover it. Renter's insurance won't cover it. You can't buy additional insurance like flood insurance that will cover it. And if a flood causes a landslide, even if you had flood insurance, it's not covered. So in my district, I had a whole house fall off the side of a hill. And then the 2 houses next to it also had to be condemned and torn down. So that's a lot of times when we're talking about, especially generational wealth, a lot of that is tied up in houses, in the house that someone buys. And you pass the house down through the family. And when your house is destroyed by a freak of nature thing, and you don't have any ability to compensate for that or recover, it can be financially devastating to families. And there's nothing that covers that right now for Pennsylvanians. And so I introduced legislation that would have a landslide insurance program through the state that people could buy into, as well as grants and low-cost loans that would be available to people who are impacted by landslides. And basically what I was getting as sort of this unsolicited advice about the lands about this bill was, well, did you know that this is how landslides start? And here's, here's why landslides are happening. And it's like, yes, I'm aware of all of the things that are causing landslides, which is why I introduced this legislation, because all of these things that are impacting landslides are none of that, if you had insurance in any capacity, none of it will help you. So it's one of those things where it's like, I'm intimately aware about what causes landslides.
Okay, well, thank you. I did not know that. So that is great. No, I feel like we have another question, which is, before your role as representative, did you have to try as hard to proclaim your identity, rather that be educational, social, or professional setting?
I think before I was a representative, I think really the first, I mean, in the legal profession, I think you absolutely have to work to proclaim your identity, but I think there are a lot more supports available to do it through the bar associations, through professional associations that have also recognized that throughout time in the legal profession, women, people of color, have been, really targeted and disproportionately disadvantaged by the fact that this is such a traditional and slow moving when it comes to progress profession, that we need actual parts of our associations, professional associations, to advocate for that. So there's the Women in the Law Division, there's the Black Lawyers Association, there's a whole bunch of affinity groups that are available to kind of help people address issues in the profession. So I would say that, yes, I have had to work on this, in sort of every aspect of my life at some point in time, but I think not nearly to the same degree as I've had to since I've been a representative, because there isn't the same kind of support and protection of having a formal association that you can kind of go to. It's strange because every elected office is kind of its own little fiefdom. So you're a little bit like you're kind of your own boss, but you also are working with for me, there's 203 members of the State House of Representatives. So, but everybody is co-equal, and there's no real like HR or anything that can hold other people accountable for how they treat you, because everybody who is a state representative, you can't be fired unless you're voted out of office. So there's not the accountability that's available in other professions.
Wow, that is kind of crazy. I can't believe that. I mean, I feel like I should have known that, but I'm sure you guys feel the same. That's wow. Thank you for that. Thank you for answering. Did anybody else have a last minute question? If not, oh, go ahead, Riah.
It's not a question, but it's a comment, because I didn't know that you were like a lawyer, and I'm pre-law, so I was like, in my head, I'm like eating this up. I'm like, oh my God, this is so good. So it was just a comment. Yeah, I just appreciated your outlook on everything, especially in that field specifically.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing, we absolutely need more diverse lawyers in every capacity. So I'm glad that you are on the pre-law track, and I hope that you do go to law school, although I think that I've spent more time talking people out of going to law school than actually going to law school, because I maintain that if you don't at least have an inkling of wanting to actually practice law, that you shouldn't go to law school, because it's a grueling 3 years. That if you want to do policy work, or you want to do something that you think a law degree would be helpful in and not practice law, there are much better, more mental health saving ways to do it. So, but that said, if you want to go to law school and you want to be a lawyer, then you absolutely 100% should do it, because we need more diverse lawyers, and we need more people who are going to advocate zealously for people, because that's the only way that the profession changes. I thought I saw that Ivory put her hand up?
I did. I just want to actually, you started to answer that already. My question already, I was going to ask, what advice would you have for young women who are interested in going to law school and or running for public office?
My advice would be to do it. It's scary. But the other thing is also be very aware of your limitations. Like, you have to take care of yourself, because they're both very intense and kind of isolating things, because you're sort of always on display. So it can feel very isolating, and with law school, it's very competitive within the law school. I describe law school as like high school in a pressure cooker, because it is you're with it's a very small group of people, and you're with them all the time. So it's very much like high school. So you get kind of like, these people are dating and then they break up and there's drama. But then everybody has an agenda because they want the best job. They're competing for the same associate positions. And, so it can be very intense and can be very stressful. And so you really need to make sure that you're focused on taking care of your mental health. And with running for elected office, it's very much the same way. It can be very intense. It can be very mentally draining. Everybody that, when I decided to run for office, people who had run for women who had run for office before were like, do you have a therapist? And if you don't, you should get one. Because you do need somebody that you can kind of check in with and make sure that, like, their whole goal is to make sure that you're still mentally okay, because it's a very stressful, grueling thing. But it's also incredibly rewarding, both from the legal side and from being a representative, because you get to advocate for people who otherwise would have absolutely no voice. They are, I get calls when I was actively practicing as a lawyer. I'm helping people who cannot understand the law, who don't know, all that's going on in that capacity. And I can explain it to them and I can walk them through it, because it's very, very scary. You have somebody's life in your hands, their financial well-being, their freedom. And it's a lot of pressure, but it's also incredibly rewarding to be able to walk somebody through something that would otherwise be very scary, but you are their guide. And as a representative, and I work with Lisa on stuff to make sure that we are getting people access to resources, to the best opportunities, that, I get to be the squeaky wheel, because all of a sudden now I can cold call people and people call me back because I'm like, hi, this is Representative Kinkead. And they're like, oh, hi. And they listen to me. So there is an aspect of automatic respect that you get to just get answers for questions that people might not otherwise be able to access. And that is incredibly rewarding. And that is probably my favorite part of the job, is to be able to have conversations with people and then go fix problems. And so if you are considering doing it, do it. And, you can always pivot. You can always decide that that's not ultimately what you want to do, but you will always wonder if you don't try. And so, I say, throw your hat in the ring and see what happens, because fundamentally it takes on average 7 times of asking a woman to run for office to actually get her to run for office. So if you are thinking about running for office, don't self-select out. Every person who meets the age requirements and the residency requirements is qualified to run for office, and no man will ever count himself out if he meets just the minimum legal requirements to be in office. And some of them don't count themselves out even if they don't meet those requirements. They'll try and do it anyway.
That was great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, I will let you guys turn it over. I don't want to monopolize all the time, because, Lisa and Riah have great things to share. But thank you guys. I'm going to roll off and run to this dinner. And but I am going to drop in the chat on my email if anybody wants to reach out or talk further. I'm happy to do that.
Thank you so much for that, Representative Kinkead. Have a great night.
All right. Talk to you guys later.
Bye.
All right, so. All right, Dr. Palmieri, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure, definitely happy to. I just have to say also, absolutely love working with Rep. Kinkead. She's the real deal. We're working with her right now on an initiative to provide youth programming to kids that live in a housing authority property in her district. And she went to bat for us to get a bus, because one of the challenges our organization has right now that's really come from the pandemic is a lack of transportation to get the kids to our programs. So I know she's gone already, but this is being recorded and want to just again give a shout out to her. She's definitely an inspiration and a wonderful collaborator. So thanks for inviting me tonight, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. This topic is something that, I remember studying, in particular, women in leadership back during my grad school days. And I was always really seeking to learn more about how to be the best version of me as a female leader, because early on in my career, especially I'm going to say in the late 90s, early 2000s, folks would often say to me, particularly men, you're intimidating, you're too domineering, you're too this, you're too that. But then if I was more quote unquote feminine, then I was too emotional, or I wasn't confident enough, or I was not prepared. And so, really just kind of understanding what are the roots of where these attitudes are coming from. And, as a leader and as a person, how can I be stronger to just, in some cases, let them go in one ear and out the other? And so I actually have a couple slides I wanted to share that I think will help me convey a little bit about intersectionality in my background and how it all comes into play if somebody is willing to make me a co-host or thank you. Okay, awesome. Okay, so let's see if it loads. All right, so the first slide, I'm sure I don't have to point out to many of you that right now women only hold 1 in 4 managerial and executive leadership positions, and only 6% of CEOs are women. So I am the first female CEO in my organization's history. It's a 133-year-old organization. There has never been a female CEO in 130 years before I was hired. I've been in the role for 3 years. Whenever it was down to the 5 finalists for this role, I was the only female. It was 4 men and me. And the board even said afterwards that they were unsure, they were unsure that a female was going to be accepted. So not only in my current role as president and CEO of one of the largest youth agencies in the region, but also in my role on boards. Oftentimes I'm the only female around a board table. And at the end of the day, what I really just remember are these words on the right-hand side of the slide. They're really my values. It's about empowerment and, being there as a mentor and as a confidant to other young women getting into leadership, remaining optimistic, even when times are tough and people don't believe in you. People will talk about you. Definitely, I like to call this the haters. I've had a lot of haters out there, because sometimes when you are a female in leadership and you're making change, sort of similar to what Rep. Kinkead said, everybody has an opinion. And it's a double standard, because sometimes a male that would be in that leadership position is not getting that same sort of level of input. And so we do have to prove ourselves a little bit more. At the end of the day, it's not about it's about we. So it's really having a solid team around you. I totally concur with what Rep. Kinkead said regarding mental health and making sure that you have that wellness and mental health in check. And don't be shy if you need therapy or you need to ask for help. That's a really important part of sometimes, this world that we live in, where we still don't, as women, may not have the same level of credibility and support as our male counterparts. And then design, always be thinking and being open-minded. So I'm all about growth mindset versus fixed mindset, and trusting, having empathy, respecting, and then really having action at the end of the day. So where do my worlds intersect? I'm a mom. So this is my son, and I'm a friend. So 2 of my good friends. I'm an advocate. This was me when I was invited to go to the Federal Department of Education to advocate on behalf of young learners, particularly young learners in urban settings where schools are under-resourced. And I'm a pet mom, so here's a picture of my cat. I am very proud Italian American. So this is actually a picture of the town where my family still has a house in Italy. And the cross that you see up here on top of the mountain was actually put up there by my great grandfather. So we definitely have some roots there, and that's a part of my identity as well. I think, similar to the last conversation that we heard, I'm also a fairly young CEO. So not only am I female, but I'm young. Certainly, I did have privilege growing up as a white woman. I do identify as hetero. And so I don't have some of that intersectionality in my world. However, I've been a fierce advocate for any kid or any youth or any person who has been, traditionally marginalized or historically left out of leadership positions, and it doesn't often always have a voice. The other thing that really identifies who I am as a leader and as a person is strengths. So I'm not sure if any of you have ever heard of the Gallup Strength Finder before. So I'm a certified strengths coach in addition to my sort of daytime work as an advocate for children. And so strengths is something that I encourage all of you to check out. If you've never done the assessment, the Gallup Strength Finder allows you to see which of the 34 strengths are your top 5. And so my top 5 strengths are strategic thinking, individualization, which is all about like kind of personalizing the experience and the conversation, building high quality teams based on their strengths, achiever, and input, which is all about sort of collecting information, research, evaluation, and then last but not least is activator. And this is this idea of turning thoughts into action. And so this is also a big part of my identity. It creates sort of a direction, a guiding force for your life. And when you understand your strengths, you can learn how to maximize your potential. So all of these strengths also have basements though. And so, for example, I might be somebody who is just intuitively strategic. I can connect the dots and I can think about contingency plans, and I love to solve problems and bring people together. But in some cases, when you're like that, you're almost like acting too fast. You have to make sure that you're not too fast with bringing people together. Because at the end of the day, we have to be very careful actually about how we bring people together. And so around this idea of community engagement, which is central to the work I do at Boys and Girls Clubs of Western Pennsylvania, it's being really intentional about how you listen, how you learn. And this is from general community members, this is from parents, this is from policymakers, this is from legislators, this is from all the different people and teams you bring together. And then being able to take that and like individualize the approach of how you do that outreach to them and let them know a little bit about you and where you're coming from. So the other thing I would say is, one of my other identities is absolutely as an artist. And so I have always been a huge fan of the arts. I was actually an art history double major. And you may think like, well, that's kind of an odd major, like what did you use that for? And I would say the biggest thing that I took from being a double major in art history was critical thinking and the ability to analyze, and especially this idea of these intersections. And so this was one of my favorite artists from the German expressionist phase. Her name is Gabriele Munter. And so Gabrielle was an extremely accomplished artist. However, she was actually married to another artist named Vasily Kandinsky. And I'm sure you've probably seen Kandinsky's work before. A number of Kandinsky's pieces, we think that she actually painted, but she never got the credit for it. So that often happens sometimes too when you're a female in a leadership role or you start to get some of that notoriety. It gets back to this idea of, are they really your ideas? And I would say when I was younger in my career, I was really worried about that and like getting the credit for the things that I had done and had led. And you do just reach a point though, where you're kind of like, well, you know what, like, it's actually really not about me. It's not about me. It's not about this work. At the same time, it is frustrating sometimes to work with people. And unfortunately, in most cases, it has been men who have taken an idea they heard me say and then actually like repeat it later in a meeting as their idea. And that gets really frustrating. And so, it's finding the right way to call that out though, without coming off, maybe, for example, like in kind of a too stern or aggressive way, because then the double standard is you're not confident, you're a B. You're not confident, you're intimidating. You're not confident, you're cocky. You're not confident, you're a narcissist. So it's really like thinking about like, how do you make those corrections and like learn the right way to do that. Another part of my identity is STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and math. I was a naval contractor working for the US Navy, and our specific team developed training to show sailors how to operate nuclear reactors on submarines and aircraft carriers. My department was 175 people in my department, and of the 175 people, 3 of them identified as women. One of them was an administrative assistant, one of them was the technical writer, and then there was me. My title was senior systems engineer. And what I really did is I developed training and did instructional design and things of that nature, curriculum development. And it would be crazy because, you know, I would go to these meetings and people would assume I was the administrative assistant there to take notes. And I had a mentor who was male, and he was definitely an ally. He came in one time and he said to me, "Palmieri, don't you take notes in the meeting. The minute you start taking notes, the minute you're going to lose your credibility." Another time he said to me, "I need to give you some advice." He said, "You know, I've been seeing you sometimes. I don't know if it'll show up because I have this filter on, but I was walking around the hallways apparently, and I must have been like holding a book like this, my notebook." And he came up to me afterwards. He said, "Palmieri, I need to give you some advice. You got to stop walking around this office like you're a schoolgirl with that notebook clutched to you like this. You lose credibility and power," were his words. I'll never forget he said the word power. "You lose credibility and power as a manager when you walk around like that." He goes, "Did the men walk around like that?" I said, "No." He said, "From now on, walk with your shoulders back, with your head up." And he said, "Hold your notebook down to the side. Hold it vertically and hold it down to the left side of you. Don't you walk around this lab like this ever again." And, you know, I remember thinking, this is crazy. Like, that I have to code switch this much to be able to fit into this environment. And I was venting one day to another colleague there, and he said to me, "Well, Lisa, if you don't like it, like, go back and get another degree and change the next generation, expose more women, more BIPOC folks." Well, he didn't say BIPOC, but, you know, I think he may have said like minorities, you know, expose more people to STEM and like get them interested and involved in these careers. And that's what I did. So I went back and I did a master's and eventually a doctorate and kind of switched to education. This was another one of my favorite heroines in inspiring stories growing up. So some of you have probably read these books, or I think Netflix has a series now that's on, a little bit different than the books. But I always really identified with Anne because I felt like, you know, she never exactly really fit in. She questioned herself sometimes if she was being too bold, or she was being too much of a tomboy, or, you know, didn't like to dress the same way as the other girls. But at the end of the day, if you finish reading the whole series, you know, her life really is fulfilled by living in her under her own terms. And so Anne is a really inspirational kind of a character to me. I think having creative confidence is also important. So don't be afraid to have that growth mindset and like have that creative confidence. Jump in there into a team, even when you think you're not going to be accepted. And you may have people, you know, that are not like you. And I've had this where men have rolled their eyes at me, or they've tried to mansplain. And, you know, just to go in there and try to ignore that and like have that creative confidence is key. Also make time to do things that are fun. So, you know, this is might not look like the most wonderful thing in the world, but this is something I recently cooked. And so, you know, make time to do things that are fun, and whatever that fun means to you. Have a hobby, have something that's a part of your identity that's not just work. I think sometimes when we're leaders in you know, these administrative type positions, especially, you start to lose your identity a little bit. So figure out what that identity is. Part of my identity is definitely also education as a lifelong learner. So between the universities I've been to, as well as some of the certification programs that you see on the right, that's definitely helped connect me to new people and new places. And then at the end of the day, the work that I've had and the jobs I've had have also been part of my identity. So, you know, going from whenever I was in high school, I originally started by doing an internship at a global public relations firm. And they actually ended up hiring me full time when I was 19 years old. So I had amazing professors at Duquesne that allowed me to sort of go back and forth between work and classes. And I did these internships, you can see on the top here, while I was in college, which eventually led to, you know, where I'm at today at Boys and Girls Clubs of Western Pennsylvania as the CEO. You can see this ultimately was my naval position. This was the school. So it's actually a pretty large campus. There's about 2,500 students there. This is the school where we taught the sailors, and this is actually the submarine. Last story I have about this, you know, women up until a few years ago were not allowed to serve on submarines. You maybe didn't know that. They were still male only. Women were not allowed to serve. And recently that changed. However, men were really not used to seeing women come down on the submarine because they didn't train to operate the subs because they weren't allowed to serve on them. Yet I'm the one writing the curriculum and the training that they're taking. So I show up, you know, and as you can see, this little ladder that goes over here and goes down, believe it or not, it actually goes 65 feet down into the water. And I had never been on one before, never been on a sub. And I show up, this is in Charleston, South Carolina. It's still there. And I show up and I'm wearing sandals, like wedge sandals. And my boss looks at me and he says, please tell me you have steel-toed boots. I said, how would I know that I was supposed to have steel-toed boots? Nobody told me that. But see, it was just like a known thing in sort of the male circles that they all wore steel boots. They all wore steel tip boots, all of them. They all wore shoes, boots, you know, and then there's me that is an outlier in this world. How would I have known that I should be wearing steel tip boots? So again, that's just like one of those things that at the end of the day, what's really helped me is to find networks of other people. And so this slide just shows you like some of the networks of people that I've been able to connect with, from foundations to national associations. And so those connections that you have with people and other places at the end of the day, it provides you that opportunity. It's provided me that opportunity to build confidence and just put myself out there. So I'll kind of end with this slide. And these are some just guiding things I want to leave you with. First of all, is like fail early and often, stay focused on the topics, defer judgment, try to have one conversation at a time and be an active listener. Encourage wild ideas, even when they're scary. Put yourself out there. Work multidisciplinary, meaning work with people from all different backgrounds. Be visual, build on each other's ideas, go for the quantity of ideas, and then look for viability and desirability. So thanks for letting me chat, everyone. Happy to answer any questions about being a female in leadership or things I presented today.
Thank you so much. That was great. I love that. I don't think I've ever, at least in my experience in life, I haven't seen a woman as accomplished as you in such a long time. I just want to say that. Thank you. That was really cool to see that. You don't usually get to hear about those stories, and that was really cool.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Did anybody have questions that they wanted to write in the chat or just scream out?
As we're waiting to see if anybody has a question, you know, I want to make a comment about the comment you just said. And so I want to tell you that I've struggled sometimes, especially over the last 2 years, with what you might call imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome is a real thing. And it's often having this feeling, even though you might be accomplished and have these degrees or have these work experiences, like you still don't deserve to be around the table, or you're still not good enough. And it's literally an everyday effort to take those negative thoughts and like squash them, right? But I think at the end of the day, the thing I would just say is, don't let anybody tell you that you don't deserve to be there, because you do.
This might be a little bit out of context, but I'm watching this show by Issa D. She's like an actress, and I'm not sure what work she does for like people of color and communities, but she talks a lot about like imposter syndrome that she's experienced. And I feel like that was kind of like deja vu. Like that was really interesting too. It kind of just came full circle for me.
Okay. I think I see a question in the chat. So
How do-
Kendra said, yeah.
How do people proudly accept and express their intersection? How do you recommend people proudly accept and express their intersectional identities? Sorry.
Mm-hmm. I think the biggest advice I would have about that is to just keep an open mind and be a lifelong learner, and to keep putting yourself out there little by little. You know, it can be scary to be vulnerable and not only accept yourself, but accept, worry about how others are going to accept you. But I think first and foremost, if you fall back on love and you love yourself, self-love is key. I recommend reading some of Gabby Bernstein's books. If you've never heard of Gabby before, she's great. And so, everybody also expresses things proudly in different ways. And so to find what that comfort level is for you and to build that self-love would be sort of the first step I would take in expressing intersectional identities. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Any more last minute questions before we move on to Riah's piece?
I just had one quick question. You mentioned wanting to actually going back to school to work to assist in getting folks, BIPOC folks specifically, into areas that they're not traditionally represented. How would you go about, or how would you recommend going about assisting in that push for individuals, for whether it be STEM or STEAM or I actually, a professor on campus asked about increasing the number of individuals of color in gender studies. So what recommendations would you have for that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I didn't really talk too much about that. I just made a brief mention. So I think first of all, co-design is key and listening and learning is key. I think if you come in, especially as a white person, if I'm to come into a community where I'm not one of the community members and like try to tell people like what they should do or how they should get into something, like that is ultimate failure. Like that does not work. And unfortunately, oftentimes well-meaning people, that's what they might do. However, my thought has always been to try to really move from well-meaning to then sort of the next thing on the continuum is being an ally, and then really also moving into a phase where you're an actor, dismantling things like systemic racism. And so what that means to really be able to do that work is to listen and design things with the people that you're actually trying to support in the organization. And so to do that, sometimes you need gatekeepers. We're doing some work in a community in Pittsburgh right now called Homewood. I'm not sure if anybody's ever heard of that community before. And so there is no way I would have just simply like walked into Homewood or like contacted clergy or community leaders in Homewood as an outsider and said, like, here's what we have to offer you. Your kids should join our Artificial Intelligence Pathways Institute. We paid them and they'll get an internship. No. Instead, what I did is I reached out to an organization called Homewood Children's Village, which is based there. I reached out to pastors John and Cynthia Wallace that run Oasis Ministries. I reached out to the principal that runs the neighborhood school called Faison. I went and set up shop numerous days at Everyday Cafe, which is a local cafe in the community there. And so I think like grassroots efforts of really intentionally building that trust over time and showing that actions speak louder than words. So if you truly are going to be an actor, you have to act. You can't just say you're going to act. You have to show up. You have to be there. And so I think that that's one part of it. I would say the second part of it is to identify and figure out how to eliminate barriers. So if the barrier is transportation to youth participation in a STEM program, how do you provide transportation? If the barrier is high school students have to work a part-time job, and so they can't do some of these academic preparation programs, the academic preparation program should pay them and find funding to pay them. So a part-time job doesn't get in the way of an experience like this that could set them up for a college scholarship. So I think about a student like Paige. Paige joined the AI, artificial intelligence program that we have, which runs 3 weeks in the summer and all school year, about 6 hours a week after school. She joined the program between freshman and sophomore year in high school. And she joined the program primarily because she could earn a stipend. She really wasn't interested in STEM or AI, but she joined it because of that. And I'm just really proud to say that now Paige is a graduating senior and has full ride scholarships at numerous universities, and she's majoring in computer science. And so part of the reason Paige found out about this experience is because we talked to her mom. And so you have to also engage parents, you have to engage the guardians, if they live with generational like grandparents, and then to be able to reach out and communicate to her grandma, for example, in a way that is really non-threatening and is very much, like, what's your vision? What's your dreams for Paige? Like, what dream do you have for her? Like, let's see if we can help you. Let's see if Paige is interested in these opportunities we have. And just approaching it in a very like backwards triangle. So instead of like the institution, whether that institution is a university or an organization like Boys and Girls Clubs, whether it's government, instead of the institution doing this, we need to like flip it and go from like the ground up. So that would be my biggest recommendation.
Thank you so much, and congratulations and good luck to Paige.
Yeah, we're all dying to see ultimately where she's going to go. She still hasn't committed yet, which she's getting pressure to do. So we're excited to see where she's going to end up.
Thank you for that. I don't necessarily want to add, but kind of put out a question to you if you've ever heard of the Bonner Leadership Program we have here on campus, because a lot of the things that you're saying about like our whole basis of the Bonner program is teaching students such as myself to engage with those communities that are in need. And it's like a main driver point that we bring home is that we're serving them, not ourselves. So to engage the community, but first understand the community, and you get the advice from the people that live there, not some metric or some data that you might have came out beforehand. So I really appreciated that perspective, and I haven't seen it yet in like a position such as yours. So like, I feel like I definitely should reach out to you after this and maybe we have weekly T&Es. So like we kind of like have a subject that we talk about, and it's for education for ourselves. So like, I really appreciate your perspective in that, because I feel like what you're doing now is kind of the essence of the Bonner program, but just wanted to put that out there. Okay, and Riah is also a Bonner with me, so that's kind of cool. But Riah, are you ready?
I'm gonna be honest, my speech is not gonna be that long. Like, that was all very good information, but mine's gonna be short and sweet because I haven't eaten all day, and yeah. Okay, so I kind of wanted to start with self-love because I don't want to say her name wrong, but Dr. Lisa, who just won.
Just call me Lisa.
Well, she touched on self-love, and that's kind of what I wanted to start out with because I felt like it was a good connection. So a lot of the times, a lot of people don't really love themselves because of like expectations others put on them. Specifically in my case, it felt like I've been stereotyped a lot, so it felt like the world didn't love me or like me. So it's kind of like, how can I love myself if I feel as if the world hates me, kind of thing. And all of my identities kind of tie into that in one way or another. And I kind of picked my identity apart. So the first part of my identity that I wanted to touch on is as a student, because I feel like while we did have Representative Kinkead and Dr. Lisa, I feel like having the student perspective, because this is a university affiliated event, is very good to relate to the student experience. So I wanted to touch on the fact that I'm a freshman, and a lot of the time I don't say seen as less than, but I have less expectations put on me. It's as if it's like, oh, why are you in that space? Why are you in this office? Or why are you speaking out on this? You're just a first year, you don't know anything. And I feel like that applies in a lot of areas. Like when I'm in a poli-sci class and all the guys speak over the girls on issues because we can't possibly understand, or even in philosophy classes where people talk just to talk and there's not actually any progress of the conversation. There's no actual discourse, it's just words. Sorry, my thoughts are kind of jumbled. Um, and then I kind of wanted to touch on like the perception of the world and how you are perceived based on your identities. Which I feel like I struggled with this question a little bit because I look at my identity as something that I'm still developing because I'm so young and I am a student. So I feel like there are different levels and different progressions to each person's identities. Currently, I feel like I think that people are inherently good, and I feel like that has been taken advantage of because when I speak out on something, it's like the world sees me as, oh, you're aggressive or you complain too much or things like that. When I really just mean good by it, I'm met with kind of this pushback that's like, why are you talking as a freshman, as a girl, as a Black person? Why are you speaking on this topic? And yeah, do you guys have any questions? I'm ready for Q&A. Like they touched on everything I was kind of gonna say. Anything?
I have a question for you. So I would just ask, with some of the challenges that you face, and kudos to you for the resiliency of looking past them. How do you kind of look past some of those naysayer comments, especially when days are really tough and like the fourth person in a row said to you, you're just a freshman. Like, what do you do? Like, what do you do, Riah, to kind of like push through?
Honestly, I don't. I would say it's a personality thing, but I'd be lying because it's not all completely that. While I am a self-motivated person, there were times where I did kind of want to give up and I didn't want to see the bright side anymore because I felt like it took too much energy out of me. But then I kind of found my support system on campus. So like that's why I thought it was an interesting tie into like others other people's perceptions of you and how the world sees you because I look at that as like community. How do you impact your community and how do they impact you? And I think of my support system like the OIE, Miss Ivory, Miss Keisha, or like even in the Bonner program with Alex, like I look up to like other older cohorts because we're like broken down into cohorts. So like I feel like it is the people around us that, and that's in the positive aspect, is what I mean by that. They keep me going. People keep me going as much as they can bring me down, if that makes sense. So I feel like there's this kind of balance of how much the world can impact you and how much you can impact the world. So yeah, I don't know if that really necessarily answers your question. I kind of just kept rambling, but yeah, that's how I look at it.
That was a good. I really liked that, honestly. I don't know if I could have said it better myself. So the next question is from Reese. Do you think there are certain topics that you feel that you get more pushback on than others?
Sorry, I'm not laughing at the question because there are so many topics that I feel not only do they get pushback on the topics themselves, but I know there are certain reactions because I'm the person it's directed at. So like if I'm talking about something race related, I know it's going to be a different reaction for me as a Black student compared to if a white student is asking and they're curious. Because to me, it's just I'm making everything about race or something like that. Or like in the gender aspect, it's like if a guy asks me a question and I answer it, and then he's like, he doesn't like my answer, it's kind of like he would react a different way if it was one of his male counterparts than if it's me. So yeah, I feel like it really depends, not necessarily on the topics themselves, but like the people the topics are being directed at and the ones they want to respond to that. Yeah.
Great answer. Again, I'm gonna keep saying that. You're great, honestly. Did anybody else have any other questions before? Let's see the time. Oh, we're kind of over an hour here. I don't want to keep you guys too much longer, but please, questions. I want to hear them.
I mean, I kind of have a question for y'all. It's kind of like back and forth, but like, is there anything anybody wants to specifically ask me about, like my identity or how I, because I know my specific experience with education institutions is a little different because I I've been in like 4 different high schools before I graduated in my hometown. So I've been in all different climates. If anybody wants to ask me like any conversations about education in general. Yeah.
You know I will. So tell so tell us a little bit about your journey. About your journey to get to Slippery Rock, the experiences that you've had, and with your identities, the positives and the negatives that you're seeing with the various pieces of your identities at SRU. I know that was a big one.
That was a big one. I might need you to remind me of the second part.
Okay, so let's start with this. Tell us about your journey with different institutions and different schools.
Okay. It's a lot. Okay, so basically I went to 2 predominantly white high schools and then 2 predominantly BIPOC high schools. So I've seen, and even in those schools that were alike, like both BIPOC schools, they had their differences, and then both PWIs had their differences, if that makes sense. Like, so with the PWIs, there was one I went to that was very openly racist and homophobic and sexist, and not an overall good climate. And anytime students would voice their opinions, it was like backlash. And that experience there kind of taught me that even if there is pushback, some of that is necessary to challenge things if you want them to change. And the other PWI I went to taught me that not every PWI will be a rough climate. It won't be like there will be schools that are receptive even if they don't necessarily have a student body that is like you, or like a majority of people who look like you. And I guess relating that to SLIP, I've kind of found like my own community in the OIE, like so, which is the Office of Inclusive Excellence. If anybody doesn't know, it's the suite on the 2nd floor of the Student Center. And I did have a very rough first semester, and it kind of made me think back to high school. And in my opinion, I did not enjoy high school, so I didn't like that they were kind of similar. But it also made me realize that those experiences kind of prepared me for here, to kind of look on the bright side despite feeling as if I didn't want to go to the school anymore. Yeah.
So then my second part of my question was, when you look at the various ways in which you identify yourself, do you see that they're like, what positives and negatives can you see, like, in how you may or may not have been supported at SLIP?
My brain is convincing me this is a trick question because I felt supported, but only in certain areas of the university, in certain aspects of my identity. Like I'll find spaces like FMLA or the Gender Studies Club as like a female, as a woman, but then I won't feel as if like I can be intersectional there. Like they're not accounting for that. Oh, I'm Black too. So that adds this other element to my identity that nobody else really has that insight to like account for that other element of my identity, which I guess is the point of like talks like this, is so that we can work through these things. And yeah, that's just one example that I can think of. My brain is really scrambled. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Love you too, Miss Ivory.
So I guess I have a question then with that. Did any of those experiences or any part of your identity, is that what led you to want to study law or go into pre-law?
Oh, of course. Sorry, I got excited. It was kind of like what Representative Emily Kinkead was talking about, is that we do need more diverse people in fields like that, because there are biases in our justice system. And I've seen them firsthand because of like family, friends. I've experienced things that should not have happened. And I feel as if I can be in this field myself, not only am I giving that representation to somebody in the future that they can like look up to and they'll see that because representation does matter, I'm also actively working to make things better for my community and other communities.
Thank you. That was great. I've said that a million times, but I truly do mean that. I think we're nearing the end here. You saw Kendra gave us a little message. You all have been incredible. It's honestly been an eye-opening experience for me. It's been really cool to hear from all your perspectives. But yeah, thank you guys. I think I'll conclude for tonight. You guys have a great night. And I hope to hear from some of you again. So, all right. Well, I'll see you guys.
Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you,
Appreciate the
everyone.
wonderful insights.